Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, where we discuss the latest DevOps news, AWS announcements, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's September 24th, 2025. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse sells AWS reference architectures that get you production ready in just 2 weeks. So if you're curious to learn more, head over to cloudposse.com. So how can you maximize today's session? Our format's very informal. You can engage as much as you'd like and ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools like Atmos, this is a great place to ask. For those on the recording, we host these calls live. Don't miss out. Join us live by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, cloudposse.com/officehours. Just enter in your email and you'll get an invite to our live weekly meeting. I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's session valuable, share it with your team. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse, where we'll be posting a recording of today's session in just a few hours. So with that, let's get into things. All right, first one I'm most excited about. We're big proponents of GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is based on YAML, as is most other pipeline systems out there these days. Rishav, I know you saw this one as well. YAML anchors are a convenient way in YAML to dry up your configuration. So, it's often said that your YAML might look like a wall of text. With anchors, you can basically label a reusable block of your YAML and dereference it any other time throughout that configuration. I was just trying to see where here in the specific, in the blog post, they don't even post an example of it. I was hoping, here, documentation for YAML anchors. There we go. Yeah, so let's say you have a workflow, in this case, has 2 jobs. You have the same environment variables that you want to reuse between 2 jobs. You can anchor it. You give it this tag, if you will, with an ampersand and some value. This can be whatever you want it to be. And then you dereference it using the asterisks here, and it injects what you have up here in here, so you can define it once and reuse it. I think this is one of the cool things about YAML. If you're a hater of YAML, then yeah, don't use it. But if you like it, go for it. I think this is really nice for this kind of situation, where especially if you're using GitHub Actions in a monorepo, where you might have lots of jobs, let's say 1 job per service in the workflow, but very similar patterns between what you're executing. Now you could define those jobs and just dereference any part of that with a YAML anchor. Any questions on YAML anchors or the utility of this, or lamenting?
It was one of the features I missed going from GitLab to GitHub, so I'm glad they finally added it.
Yeah, it's been in GitLab for a long time. I mean, and by necessity almost, right? Because GitLab is very much about one very large workflow file, right? And yeah. So I think this is welcome. Now, if we could only support workflow files and folders, every single announcement, every single blog post, the first thing I scan for is, yes, they've added folder support in GitHub Actions. Oh, no. It's the most requested thing. All right, next.
We were a bit scared because, now people are just going to go wild with YAML anchors left and right. But I feel like those who know YAML anchors, I feel like they're going to know how to do it well, because it's complicated enough as it is without going too crazy with it.
Well, there's a learning curve associated with using YAML anchors for sure. I think a new set of best practices will need to be developed for writing workflows that now incorporates and takes advantage of this. And by the way, your background is not your audio. It sounds like you're
really bad.
No, it sounds like you're in a hall, but the background is like outside somewhere.
I am outside now. Converted barn. Also,
That's a cool
massive
space.
roof. Oh,
Oh, so that's not grass behind you. That's that's a rug.
for the folder support, what do you mean by that? Is it like so you can just pull from a whole folder of workflow scripts?
No, so, well, like an example, let me go to Cloud Posse examples here. So here is a one pattern that we have for deploying ECS apps, let's say, with GitHub Actions. And holy moly, that's a lot of workflows. Well, it's actually, it is a lot of workflows, yes, I know that, but it's not a lot of workflows. The idea is 90% of these files you could put somewhere else, like in a shared repository for all of your services. And then you simply have a simple workflow like this that calls your reusable workflow. Now, it would make our distribution of this example so much easier to explain if we could just put those other workflows in another folder, but it's not supported in any way, shape, or form in GitHub Actions to have workflows in different folders. Actions, they can exist anywhere in a repository, but the workflow files themselves can only exist in exactly this location.
Yeah, I'm with you now. That is frustrating.
Hey, Duffy.
Hey there. Yeah, so I've had to work around reusable actions several times because they're very limited. One of the problems is that if you're doing your job with drawing your code, you're trying to write reusable stuff and you're calling it all over the place. Well, it turns out that reusable actions will only let you nest a call stack 3 deep. So reusability breaks real quick. And I found that you can write composite actions, which are essentially the same syntax, will let you do all the same bashy things. They just load as an action instead of a reusable workflow, and it removes a lot of these constraints. I just offer that up. It's pretty
Yeah.
easy to convert a workflow into a composite action and put it in any old directory you would like.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And that, so I think it's pretty nice architecturally here, what you're describing. So to get everybody on the same page, what you can do is there's like different levels of abstraction when it comes to GitHub Actions conceptually as a product. One of those concepts is a action, which is a reusable, think of it almost like a function. Then you have a workflow, which can have steps, and those steps can call actions. And then you have jobs, which are, they run in parallel unless they depend on each other. That's how you can kind of scale out your workflows as much as you want. And what you're describing is that instead of using a reusable workflow, as we're using here, you can use a reusable action and of type composite. So we do a lot of that at Cloud Posse as well. We have a lot of composite actions, but there's a big difference between them. So what a composite action does is it lets you, let's see if I can find a quick example here. So a composite action lets you take anything under steps and put it and bundle it as a reusable action. And then that action could be in another repository or any other folder path here. What it doesn't let you do is nest jobs under composable action, which would be pretty cool because that's how you can parallelize a lot of things. And what you're right that I don't know that there's a hard limit of 3 levels deep of nesting of reusable workflows, but I know we've hit it for practical reasons. And maybe they've changed this because the practical reasons that we hit were that the GitHub UI would literally crash when you had like thousands and thousands of jobs, such as using it for drift detection, which we've done, and that was the biggest problem we ran into there. So I think jobs is the limiting factor there, more than matrices. All right. Next, next one was one of the things that we've seen coming out a lot more lately, most recently, was Dependabot announcing that you can now have a minimum release age when it opens PRs. So you're not on the cutting edge of supply chain attacks. This is an optimistic layer of defense, if you will, within security, where you just don't update right away a particular dependency. You let it burn in, let everybody else kind of figure it out. No, what really happens is there's about 2,000 AI security startups that are all downloading these packages, and one of them is bound to find that vulnerability before you. So just by slowing down the rate of updates, you can be more secure. And this is now a setting introduced in PNPM. So when you ask it to update, it won't automatically always pick the very, very latest release that was just released 15 minutes ago with a supply chain vulnerability. Any comments on this one? I think this is a must-have if you're using PNPM to enable this now. All right. Next one, I thought it was interesting, just, peeking behind the curtains a little bit, understanding how these, massive AI providers or LLM providers, whatever the technical term is, operate, and the kinds of bugs that can be introduced that reduce the quality without it actually being a problem with the model. If you use Claude Code or Anthropic, e.g. via Cursor or Claude Code, you might have noticed a degradation in the quality of its responses, and they break down basically a timeline of events of roughly 3 different problems. One was they were routing certain requests to like a large token model or something, and then others were going to, when they shouldn't have been. They had math problems that were causing some of their what was this one here that was causing some problems with the probability calculations, and they were also had some random corruption getting injected into tokens that caused some problems as well. So it should, those are all fixed now, so hopefully the quality of your experience is better now. So the other announcement that got my attention was in SCPs for service control policies on AWS. One of the, so an SCP is a way to set a boundary on what you can do inside of an AWS account. Even if you're an administrator in that account, this is a permissions boundary that prevents things from happening. Like, you may not leave the parent organization is a common SCP. The frustrating thing with SCPs was they didn't support like the full language or dialect of IAM, so you were limited in how expressive you could be. That is no longer the case, and now SCPs support the full power of IAM expressions. And finally, this was one you shared with me, Rishav, in the Office Hours channel. This seems too horrible to be true. I can't believe it. Anyone could sign up for an Entra account. Entra is what Microsoft used to call, I believe, Azure AD. That's the new name for their single sign-on product. And even with a free account, it was possible to request an actor token of a certain scope, and that one of those could be at an administrative level, and that was like global to Microsoft Entra. So you could take over any tenant with those permissions, and a security researcher untrack that. Did I get that right, Rishav? Yeah. That is just so, like, you know, you got to hand it to AWS. We've never heard of anything as critical as this. And while I say this is surprising, it is somehow not surprising based on the track record. And yet I got nothing but love for Microsoft these days. I mean, they do so much good for open source and so much good for the community, and they give so much back through compute and GitHub Actions and Copilot and so much stuff. It just hurts that they keep on having these problems. It's like systemic problem in security. All right, anything else to add to this?
Yeah, this one's just unbelievable.
All right. That's all I got. Anyone have something else interesting this week? Let me check the Zoom chat. Yeah, very nice, beautiful reverb there in the hall that you're in, Rashad. It doesn't come across that well on the Zoom, but it sounds like it'd be really nice to sit where you're at. Um, all right. Oh yeah, and the other part of that announcement was for GitHub Actions was that you can now have non-public workflow templates, but I'm a little bit confused with that because I'm pretty sure I thought you could already do that at least in GitHub Enterprise using internal repos. But
Yeah, I did notice that, but I wasn't too sure about like how useful that one is either. I'll be honest, I don't think I'm making much use of workflow templates in the first place. But I will say the last announcement on that same blog post, the one about getting the job check run ID, that's another really useful one because that used to take like 2 or 3 API requests to get that check ID.
Unfortunately, Rishav, it's really hard to hear. Yeah, just too much background noise today. Sorry. Yeah. I was gonna say, let's see. Um, yeah, what was this other one that Chris Massard shared? Hackers exploit Pandoc to target AWS, IMDS, to steal EC2 IAM credentials. Interesting. So how did this attack work, Chris? This must be I'm guessing this is the V1 version of IMDS, but it doesn't mention if it's the V2 or V1 version of IMDS. Have they, because V1 is still available, right, of IMDS? Maybe I'm mistaken. All right. Cool. Well, let's transition then. Oh, you guys didn't see what I was scrolling around on here because
I was just going to say, I don't think it's the right screen.
Thanks. Yeah, so this was the hackers exploit Pandoc, which is Pandoc is like the FFmpeg of document manipulation. It's been around forever, and it's used anywhere you're converting like PDFs to document formats or HTML or things like that. So apparently,
Hey, sorry, I was having a headphone issue trying to respond earlier. I don't recall which version, and I just got a little scrambled with my headphones. But basically, it was like if you were running on EC2, say like a web server or something, there was like a SRF vulnerability, if I recall, where you could directly get a token from IMDS off the instance through like remote code execution, and it wasn't theoretical. It was found by Wiz.
yeah,
There used to be one like that on ECS too, but I think that's patched.
and but that web application would somehow have to be calling Pandoc, no?
I'm not sure if it just had to be installed on the EC2 and if they had to be utilizing it. I'd have to look at the article again.
Yeah.
But I've used Pandoc quite a bit recently. So when I saw it, I definitely checked that it was not in my blast radius.
Interesting. All right. This was the key thing here. Yeah, so if the document that is rendering had an iframe tag in HTML, it would then follow that, and that could have been a link to.
You're still on the Microsoft.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What a klutz. Oh, I have too many windows here. All right, there we go. All right, you see this now? Yeah. Yeah, so it's this. So my guess is if this is working with iframes, that's got to be IMDS v1. IMDS v2 addresses this by only working with posts. You have to do post request to the endpoint with a token of some kind that's signed. And I thought IMDS, what? Because of enforcement of IMDS v2, which is session oriented. Yeah. So it would have been much worse on v1, but these days v2 is the default. And I don't know if you have to disable IMDS v1 or if it's disabled by default. I don't remember anymore. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Let's see here. Rishabh shares another one here. Let's open this in the right browser this time. So from the GitHub Actions changelog, the last announcement identifying running jobs with job check run ID in GitHub Actions context is another big one for maintainers, since it allows for easy ID and editing of status checks, especially for jobs running in a matrix strategy. I feel like this should click for me, but it's not clicking for me right away. Okay, so now these are available as environment variables so that you can link to it, link to that run, for example, in a comment.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So initially it was added, but as a job docs variable. Now this PR is opened up off the back of that to add them as real environment variables, so you don't have to mess around with tokens, access permissions.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I know we've wanted to do that in the past, so that's really convenient. All right. Well, let's move on to Q&A. Can we get any questions answered today? Anyone have some problems they're grappling with or want some advice? This is open to anyone to contribute.
I have a question. I don't know if I can go ahead.
Hey, Yusuf. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So my question is, I don't know how you guys handled it, but it's pretty much about the RDS backup or resource strategy. I work with a team that sometimes we usually need to have the same copy of the data we have in production on dev. So the usual way I do it at the moment is snapshots. But snapshot comes with the restriction of you have to use the same database name, and I think there's other restriction about naming. And of course, you also need to reset the password because it uses the same production password that comes with the snapshot. So I've been thinking of a better way to handle this because I work with a company that work in the vending machine industry across the Asia. So I've been trying to find a way to solve this. I tried the DB dump and restore way. It's quite, it takes so much time because we're talking about 2 terabytes data. So now I need some advice. Have anybody tried something like this, or at least can I get some headway on how best to solve this problem?
Yeah, so this is a really common use case or problem that I don't believe Amazon has a great story for to this day. And there's, yeah, so you mentioned it's like a 2 terabyte database, but let's also, get everybody on the same page in terms of overall best practices. And generally, you don't want to have the live production snapshot running in a dev or staging environment, especially if it has any customer PII or email addresses or so forth, because the last thing you want is a dev accidentally running something that then blasts off an email campaign or leaks other information about those customers. So the overall best practice is generally to sanitize that and create anonymized version of that data set. And then developers shouldn't be expected, so you're running this as an RDS, right? So you still theoretically could have a database with 2 terabytes of data, but do you really need that? So the amount of data you need probably depends on what you're trying to test, and whether you're doing load testing where you might need a full data set is different from if you're just validating feature functionality in preview environments and so forth. For example, if you're using preview environments, you probably don't want to create a 2 terabyte database for every single preview that you spin up. You just want a smaller data set. So having fixtures is one way of doing that. But the problem with fixtures is that they're never adequate enough. They don't have enough. It's usually not enough data to make them worthwhile. So there's some open source tools and there's some SaaS products, and I just this moment it hits me when I need to pull it up. I can't remember what it's called. We have a couple customers using them and very happy with it. That facilitates this whole process of creating dev quality databases. And in this product, once it'll hit me, maybe. Ben, do you remember what product I'm thinking of? Or Jeremy White?
I know what you're talking about, and I'm forgetting the name.
Yeah. I was
Redgate, Flyway.
Flyway. That wasn't the one I was thinking about, but they might do similar things.
Mm-hmm.
DB Snapper looks like it's something similar, but that's also not the one that I'm thinking of. But the idea is that you could create them that sanitized data set that developers can use. And what's also really cool, I'll look it up after this, but the service that I'm thinking of, it can also create Docker images with a reduced data set. And then you can even run that locally, for example, as in your Docker Compose workflows, for example, if you need a Postgres database with a sanitized snapshot. I think the holy grail for this is what Neon has done, neon.tech. Granted, I don't think it does sanitization that I'm saying, but one of the nice things that you can do with neon.tech, which is a Postgres, speaks the Postgres wire protocol, is create branches of a database. So this is really convenient if you want to have you have like a staging database, and then you can have a snapshot for every preview environment that you spin up, and test run your migrations, and then when that preview environment is merged or closed, then that branch is destroyed. So that one is neon.tech. That doesn't really help you if you're using Aurora, though, of course. If you're on Vercel, this is probably what you're already using. What is the thing I'm thinking of?
What about migration? So if we consider migration for the database schema, that's also so align with what you said here, the data subset, sanitization, everything, and also migration should, if he could even integrate it in a pipeline, that's also gonna make his life or the company life easier, I guess.
Yeah, and running those migrations, that complicates everything, because you technically need to restore or reset that database for every release that you want to test, then, to ensure that you're able to run those migrations securely.
Found it. Tonic.ai.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you. So this is the service that a couple of our customers use. I would check them out then. We don't have hands-on experience with it, but this is the problem they directly solve.
Okay, thank you. I'll check it out. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And using Tonic.ai as a search keyword will probably lead you to a pretty popular open source project. And I feel like it's an open source project backed by a Y Combinator company. So it's, you know, open source as marketing, so to say. And that could be a free alternative. All right. Any other questions we can get answered today?
Speaking of this, how do you guys handle staging environment at scale? So, at my previous company, it was a small one, so we used to just spin up ephemeral environments for every developer, and that was pretty easy because there was no much of services. But at a big scale, how do you manage this? Because when I think of it, the only way that will scale is you have like a main staging environment, and when someone wants to deploy his service, for example, they will just deploy their services and communicate with the main staging environment.
Yeah.
That's the only ephemeral way I can think of it.
It's a very complicated problem to solve that sounds so simple on the surface. And we've gone down this road many times with customers. And if your product wasn't built from the ground up to work in this way, to be more conveniently operated with like in ephemeral environments, it's really hard to add on later. So let's talk perfect world, right? And that's seldom the way it is. In a perfect world, to do this at scale or some scale, you know, it's a relative term. You can have a core set of services, for example, in a dev cluster running on, say, Kubernetes. And for when you want to spin up an ephemeral environment, those could be in one or two services of that feature that you're testing could be spun up in another namespace. And then using search domains, for example, in DNS, unless that domain resolves locally in that namespace, it can fall back to that service in the shared dev namespace of the Kubernetes cluster. But again, I'm talking perfect world, and that's seldom the actual scenario because that's a one direction path. And if that service ever needs to talk back to your service, then that's not possible. I think one of the ways companies solve this is using service meshes and configuring Istio to help with the routing aspects of that based on cookies. You can basically, well, cookies is an oversimplification based on the characteristic of the mesh. But you can, this is one of the arguments for using feature flags and actually merging that into main or the next release, for example. So you can enable that feature and test it with everything else that's running in that environment. So I think feature flagging, launch darkly, or things like that is the only scalable way if you have a very large microservices architecture and you can't spin up absolutely everything in order to test something.
Yeah.
Best case, yeah.
Because even the solution I had in mind that if you had like a main staging environment and you want to spin up your own service, for example, so let's say every developer that works in this service, they will just spin up their own ephemeral service with its own dependencies and databases and so on. But that cannot be globalized across the company because it will have the same problem that you will face. We already faced when spinning up multiple ephemeral environments. Yeah, we have used celebrations before.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're pretty familiar with the problem and explored it. Therefore there is no generic solution to this. It is very specialized to your product, the data, the scale data, and the things you're trying to do with it.
Yeah. The only big scale, I think, they solved this problem, which I think left, but they built their own framework that when you hit up a new your own service, for example, you're just injecting a header or something or a query parameter, something like that, but it will get directed to your own ephemeral service too.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I think people have accomplished using Istio in some capacity. We don't get involved at that level of the software delivery process to solve it, so I can't speak personally on it. But if anybody else has experience, definitely speak up. All right. Good questions. Anything else we can discuss today?
So I've been poring over the docs of Atmos, right? As I'm not yet, I've never used it and looking at it, right, quite a bit. And when I came up against its use within GitHub Actions, and it said for artifact storage, right, like plan storage for Terraform, it requires a S3 bucket and a DynamoDB table and stuff like that, right? If I'm using GitHub Enterprise and I don't provide it anything, will it just use the artifact storage that is in my, my pipelines that I run, or I just have to like set that up on
Yeah.
the local level, I guess?
Yeah, so there are a few things here, but let's get everyone on the same page. So first, we'll have a batch of updated documentation PRs coming out this week and next week.
Nice.
So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully, it'll make parts of the documentation easier to follow. The next thing, what are we doing in our GitHub Actions? Why do we have this plan file storage? And you didn't ask this, but is it required and so forth? So one of the best practices that we've subscribed to or follow with Terraform is during the PR phase, you create a plan file of what's going to change when you deploy this. And you store that plan file somewhere, so you have an artifact of it. And then when you merge that PR, and at some point down the road, whether it's through release or whether it's through automatic merges to main or any number of other events, when you want to deploy those changes, you pull down that plan file, and that's what you're actually applying. So that way, what you approve is what gets rolled out. There are variations to this methodology we could also get into, but to address your specific question here about that plan file, right now, we don't support GitHub artifacts as a way of storing it. And I'll talk about the pros and cons and where we're going with that. We do support using multiple different backends for that plan storage. In the GitHub Actions, we support using Azure Blob Storage, we support Google Object Storage, and we support S3. So it's not just Amazon, but all of our examples are probably for AWS because that's what we ourselves use. The other implementations were contributed by our community and done on behalf of customers. So artifact storage. The reason we, at least at the time we wrote it, do not support GitHub artifacts is for a couple of reasons. One is, it's not unheard of that your artifacts contain secrets. For example, if you are deploying a RDS database, the master password would be in that plan file, and that's a liability. Of course, putting that object in that plan file in S3 allows us to leverage GitHub OIDC to control who, what, when, how that artifact is accessed. Using GitHub artifacts is a lot more limiting. So I think it's good in a home lab kind of scenario. It's good if you have other controls in place that make sure you never have such a password ever in the plan file. I don't know if there's a generic way of ever accomplishing that, but maybe with Chekhov or Wiz or things like that, you might be able to catch that early and prevent it. So that's why we don't support it right now. What we do support is not using the plan file at all. And that is a good way to get started, just to keep things simple and then get it all working, validated, and make sure you like it before you invest a lot of time getting all of that underpinning infrastructure in place.
Yeah. Well, and I did see that other component that y'all had as well, right? That would build that storage. So yeah.
Yeah, and we have some examples of that too. But I would say what I would do to start with is just get the actions working without the plan storage, and I believe that can be disabled. Then you can get the feeling of it end to end, and then this is an optimization that you can add later on. Longer term, the plan that we have is to move all of that core functionality as a integration within Atmos natively, and that'll vastly simplify utilizing it in GitHub Actions, as well as increase the power of doing things like maybe using artifacts. The reason we didn't use artifacts originally, even for like dev purposes, was it was tricky to find the artifact, the specific artifact that we wanted from a different job execution. So if one job creates the plan and stores that as an artifact, retrieving that artifact for the appropriate commit was, well, at least at the time, not worth the effort. We tried a little bit. On the other hand, Rishav here has done it. I know in his GitHub Actions for Terraform, but I don't know, what assumptions or what his approach was.
Yeah, I mean, in my other, my current Terraform workflow that I wrote, I just, I do that as well. With either the artifacts or just in general having a plan, and that is what is passed to the apply, no matter what, right? Like whether it's in a PR or not, like that's the only thing that can be deployed within that job, right? Because multiple developers in the same place, they might have pushed something in, even in the same branch, right? And you just don't know that that's what's actually going to execute. We got around it, I guess, in these scenarios with just using actions upload artifact, and passing that up and then calling that back with download.
Yeah, it was just
into there.
The right ID that we struggled with it, but it could have been the way we approached it. The way you maybe implemented it was in a more straightforward way that made that maybe easier to accomplish.
Yeah, and I mean, and I have no problem, right? Setting, I understand all the things that you've described and agree with them, wholeheartedly from the S3, security perspective or other, storage. This was more for with my initial one, looking at creating those or using that Terraform AWS or AWS repo component, right? And just getting that kind of factory set up.
Gotcha. Cool.
So yeah, and I do also try to generally split out, like if something doesn't need to run under the context of AWS or interact with those resources, that it only needs to reach as far as it has to, right? So we have traditionally split out, like if we're like our other factories would run and either self-hosted runners or GitHub runners themselves, because it's only hitting the GitHub API and not pulling directly anything from AWS. But if it needed to do anything like that, then we would use our self-hosted runners within code build, which brings me into my next question about authentication for Atmos. You're saying that for OIDC, and I do see that the pass and the or the plan and the apply roles, right, which is great. And we also struggled with that from a hub and spoke model, as well. But if we're using code build to spin up runners that are, they're getting that job from the webhook that is set up between code build and GitHub itself through that application. I can't use OIDC. Will that break anything? Because when my self-hosted runners are birthed, they get the instance profile that would give in this current deployment, just the hub, right, which gives them like, hey, I can access the S3 bucket that holds our plan files, or not plan files, the state files, and then it can assume into whichever account it would need to perform those actions, which comes from other variables. So just curious of how ingrained OIDC is into this architecture, or if it can just be pushed over to what I have.
Yeah, so there was a lot to unpack there, and what I first thought I was listening for, so to say, was maybe not the end result. So first of all, to get everyone on the same page, what you are working on is Terraform, Cloud Posse, Terraform components, and you are deploying the AWS GitHub repository component.
Yeah.
And so your architecture right now consists of GitHub Enterprise, and you're using code build as your runner infrastructure for your GitHub actions. And you are asserting that you cannot use the standard GitHub action to exchange a GitHub token for an AWS credential via OIDC?
No, I'm saying that I have ripped out OIDC,
Okay.
and the only authentication between GitHub and AWS is that that application connection that it tells you to make, and it basically inserts a webhook, and workflow job queued, and if it meets those requirements for that build project, it sends that over to our AWS environment. So it's application authentication. So I don't need to have ID token, write or read in my workflows, because all that authentication happens whenever it runs on that self-hosted runner.
So so this is using basically like an instance profile of that. Gotcha. And that's what provides the credentials, so that Terraform would be able to access the state backend that you're using for this component, right?
Right.
Yeah. So as far as setting it up, that won't be a problem. The only thing you're going to want to make sure is that the provider configuration that you've configured in Atmos won't be, you don't want to do the role assumption in Terraform, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So the backend role shouldn't be defined. There should be no assume role defined in the provider config, and it should just use the role or the permissions that it has on the runner, which will just happen automatically by the SDK that Terraform uses for AWS. And then the question is, where do you get the secrets from? Well, those are presumably going to be an SSM, right?
Yeah, and like that is how I'm doing right now. So like I had taken out, so like I have the step for configure AWS credentials, right? And this is all outside of Atmos, right?
Yeah.
And role chaining is true, and then I have the role to assume, which is the role, the elevated role, right? The spoke role that it would get based on where it needs to execute. So the runs on is just code build, and then the code build project name, the GitHub run ID, and the GitHub run attempt, and that's what kicks off the birthing of those runners. And then, yes, the instance profile that it gets has generic, level permissions, and then it has the ability to assume outwards. So when Atmos runs, right, and everything that I saw around from its authentication, into AWS was very tied to OIDC itself, right, of how it reaches in. But if I just don't have that, my assumption is that Atmos is just going to run on my code build runner, and
Yeah.
that's just it, right? It'll do what it needs to do given everything else that's underneath it. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't, because I haven't looked very so far into Atmos code or anything, and I can't read all that much, but that I wasn't missing something from that might just be inherently great in and required from OIDC.
No, but just a shameless plug. We brought it up. It's still not merged. Okay, I cringe. Any day now, we are though adding very robust auth mechanisms natively within Atmos. That doesn't directly address, or how you say, it doesn't sound like you're going to use those right now. But what that would enable you to do is move all role chaining natively into Atmos. So you don't need the GitHub action workflows to do that.
Yes. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah.
But yeah, any day now. But we keep pulling Ben away on other projects or other billable things, so we haven't gotten back to this implementation. But very soon it should be out, and I'm super excited about our auth implementation.
Soon, yeah.
All right. Questions? Any other questions? Let's see. Oh, whoa, there's a lot of messages in the chat I haven't seen. Austin asks, okay, so Presidio, what was the context here?
That was when we were talking about that the database anonymizing and sanitizing.
Okay. And does Presidio do that?
That was for detecting and redacting PII and sensitive information. Yeah, the identification as well.
Let me open that up here.
An interesting one that brought up is if you had PII and images, you're catching that stuff as well.
Interesting. I hadn't seen this project, so thanks for sharing. That's cool. Pretty popular, 5,600 stars. Austin, S3 native locking in place of DynamoDB. So, Austin, I think this was when we were talking about plan file storage and DynamoDB and why, and it's easy to confuse that with what Terraform does for state locking, and that that Terraform itself or OpenTofu historically used DynamoDB as a distributed lock system, basically. We are using DynamoDB for plan file storage, so it's a metadata storage where we can look up the plan file for a given commit SHA and other corresponding metadata such as the pull request number and the S3 bucket that it was stored to, and other things like that. I forget everything that we have in that DynamoDB table, but that was the reason why we used DynamoDB for that, and why it wasn't just using the native S3 locking, which is nice. I'll be honest, I really wish we didn't have any of these other dependencies. I want it as simple as possible, and I wish you could just run it with whatever capabilities you have in the context. So like what Casey was saying, like in GitHub Actions, can we just use artifacts? Yeah, I would love that. Just keep it simple and not have a dependency on a metadata storage system like this. So I think we might, with trade-offs, we might consider a simpler solution down the road that doesn't involve DynamoDB. for this, and that would be an opt-in type of thing. Rishav did share his strategy. It's a GitHub action for using Terraform with plan files stored as artifacts. Rishav does not use Atmos yet. We're still working on converting him to Atmos. All right. Could really use his mind in helping us work through some of these GitHub action problems. So, well,
I had thought I had saw in Atmos and somewhere in Slack that we were talking about the backend config for S3 that and whether or not you needed that DynamoDB table for state file locking, that if you removed it and just put use lock file instead, that it would. Atmos did support that.
Yeah, so Atmos supports it because Atmos actually knows nothing really about that backend configuration. What Atmos is doing is serializing that to HCL.json. So whatever is supported by the underlying Terraform CLI that you're using, whether OpenTofu or a BSL Terraform, it will just read that backend file that's generated. And the generation is, of course, so that you can reuse a root module in different contexts based on settings that come from the stack configuration.
Perfect.
So that'll work. That's been tested. We have moved our reference architecture over to using state files as well. State locking files, so to say.
Yes.
Cool. Well, we are at time for today. I'm going to wrap things up. Just want to say thanks everyone for participating in our office hours this week. We will be posting this to our YouTube channel in just a couple of hours. So keep your eyes posted for that if you want to share it with your team. If you're ever interested in getting more support directly from Cloud Posse, that's how we survive on our open source. Perfect timing, Google Docs. I got signed out. Anyways, yeah, so if you ever need some support, go to cloudposse.com/support. We provide commercial support for all of our open source and also have packaged solutions. And lastly, well, I can't even go to the last page. Get involved. Go to cloudposse.com/Slack if you want to join our Slack team, cloudposse.com/Slack. If you haven't joined our office hours yet, get an invitation to our live event by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. And well, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Take care.